Hi, in this video we're going to take a look at what preflighting is, why it's done, and we'll take a look at some of the basics of using it in InDesign. So first of all, the term preflighting comes from the aviation industry. It's a term that pilots use when they get ready to fly. They got a checklist. They go and they check everything on their plane to make sure that it's functioning properly, that they've got the equipment works, the radios, the radar, they got the fuel, that everything works. So they go through a checklist, they call that a pre-flight, and then they are ready to take off. So a similar thing with print jobs. You get the files from the designer and you go through and check everything, make sure everything is great before you send it to press. So it's kind of a fun metaphor, and we'll see that being played out here later in this lecture. Anyways, the main purpose of preflight is to catch the mistakes before they go to press. So it's a pretty simple concept. When prepress gets your files, they will do a thorough analysis. They'll tear your artwork apart. They'll examine how it was built. They'll look at every image. They'll look at all the strokes and the fills and the color swatches. They'll look at your links, your image file formats, whether they're JPEGs or TIFFs or RGB and CMYK. They'll look at your Illustrator files to see if they're built with the proper spot colors and so on. They'll check for bleed and image resolution and a whole range of things, and then they'll usually create a report. And the report is given back to the designer, especially if it has things that are necessary to be corrected, and other things can be suggested corrections. So preflighting happens in pre-press. It's one of the first things that they do. They get your files and they just start examining them. When you're in, or when your files are being preflighted, prepress does find a lot of errors, and the most common one here, as you can see, is low resolution images. You can see that's 70-something%. Incorrect color space, that means your color mode, which is CMYK or RGB or lab, right? So having incorrect color spaces. Look at that right there, no bleed. That's like one of the most common things that designers learn and should be doing, but it's also the third most caught mistake in prepress. So even experienced designers are forgetting their bleeds. Fonts not embedded, so or not included with the files. So embedded means when you make a PDF, that font gets included in the PDF. It's embedded into the PDF. Or if you're sending InDesign files, your fonts need to be included in the packaged folder. Problems with transparency. This is transparency is when you have like an image in InDesign and you start to make it transparent so you can see through it. Or if you have other effects that go on, like in Illustrator, you might have drop shadow effects or speckle brush effects, raster effects essentially. That's transparency, and that can cause some problems. Number of spot colors, so when designers are putting in spot colors but they add too many. Overprint, we talked about overprint in this class, and what happens when they get some overprint happening. And we've also talked about this, I don't really refer to it as TAC, but the total ink coverage. So you want to have about 320% ink coverage. That's the buildup of the ink, and so sometimes that's too high. This has to do with color management. We'll talk in a later time, the ICC profile. The dimensions don't match the size. So you say it's 8.5 by 11, but you turn in a file that's 9 by 12 or something. You got the wrong size. And just one more here, problems with flattened transparency. So when you do have those Illustrator files put into InDesign and that Illustrator file has drop shadows and some transparent imagery in it, and then you apply more of it in the InDesign file. You get these layers of transparency, and when you go through prepress and preflight, they try to flatten it down because it needs to just turn into halftone screens. It needs to turn into halftone screens and color separations. So all those layers get flattened down and then resplit back up into CMYK. And there can be problems with that. So like a drop shadow might just disappear, or the drop shadow might print funny, or your transparency on a photo might not work and it would show up at 100%, things like that. But anyways, you can see there's a whole host of things here, but the most common problems are low resolution, incorrect color mode, bleed, fonts, and so on. So in prepress, they use additional software that's designed just to do pre-flighting. One of the most popular is called Flight Check. Here's where it plays off of that airline metaphor. So they've got a software called Flight Check, and you can see that there's a lot here. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. They got the ground controls, so they even keep the metaphor going there. And each one of these is a set of instructions. So right now it's selected on images, and you can tell the software what to look for, like to flag these images, flagged a picked file, a JPEG, to flag these images, and so on. Also to flag duotones, tritones, quadtones, RGB color. Flag if a file is missing, a missing or modified image, and so on. You can see over here there's resolution, so you can set resolutions for images to flag if it's outside of a certain range. So all of these options down here are part of the images up here, and so for all of these tabs, you've got more options, lots of options, and you can save the set and run your file against different presets for ground control, for flight check, for pre-flighting. This is an example of a page that was, or a report from Flight Check, and so you can see here we've got it's flagged, or it's listed all the colors, and all the colors are in CMYK there, and it even shows these are all the swatches from the swatches panel. It shows they're in CMYK. It also shows their color build, and then this actually will show over here how it's used in the document, whether it's used in a gradient or in a stroke and so on, or on text. And then it's got some fonts here, so it shows the fonts used in the document. It flagged this one with red. There's a red X, and apparently that font is missing. There's no information for it. And images too. So here's images. All these ones are flagged. It lists them. There's JPEGs and so on in here. They're all linked. They're not missing. It shows their file size. These are Photoshop ones. Here's the mode. You got RGB. And then you have the resolutions here. So you've got low res files. I think it even gets the ones that are scaled incorrectly, or that a resolution is still too low here with the scaling. So it was 180 dpi, but it got scaled up, so it's down to 101 ppi. So that's just an example of how detailed these preflights. So basically they drag your InDesign file, drop it into a hot folder, and about a minute later or seconds later, it pumps out a report like this. They can distill this information down and report it back to you to say, hey, you got these low resolution images, this font is missing, etc., and that you need to correct that as a designer. So preflighting is built into InDesign. Since InDesign is a layout page layout program. It's meant to accept all these different file formats and text and to send files to printers. So it has preflighting built in. You can go to the window menu, output, and then preflight. And I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute here. It also preflights live while you work and when you're packaging folders. So let's take a little quick look here. I've got this file open, and when InDesign is preflighting live, in the bottom of your window there's a little green or red light, and here it's red, which indicates that there are errors, and it says 7 errors. And I can click on that to open up a preflight panel. Sorry, that's outside the screen. Or you can just double click on it and it pops open the preflight panel. So preflight is on, and it's working with a profile, which is just the basic standard profile from InDesign. It pretty much just checks for missing links, missing fonts, and I believe overset text, where text, there's too much text for the text box and it doesn't all show. They call that overset. The text is getting cut off. So in this window here, you can drill down to see what the errors are. So this says overset text. There's one instance of it, and it's a text frame. If I click on that, it'll show me where it's at. And there it is. Overset text is shown by a red plus sign in the bottom corner of a text box. So that would need to be resolved. There's more text here than what was shown. And you can see that it's preflighting live. If I drag that down to reveal the rest of the text, the red plus sign goes away and the preflight error goes away, and we're down to 6 errors. Links, missing link. There's 6 instances of missing links. It shows the names of the links, and if I click on here, it'll show where they're at and highlight them. So that link is missing there. That one's missing. That one's missing. That one's missing. That one's missing. And that one's missing. And subsequently, we can also check the links panel, and we can see, yep, there's the red link there. We'd have to go through and correct those. Or if you're a prepress person and you're preflighting, you would report these and just note them down and give that back to the designer for them to correct. So this is how Preflight works in InDesign. We're going to do an exercise with this in class to build your own profiles and work with this a little more. There are some things that this Preflight in InDesign will not catch. Things you want to look for, like text in the gutter or near the edge of the page that's getting cut off. Heads cut off, by that I mean when somebody's head is at the edge of a picture frame, and it might be getting, or the edge of a page, and it looks like their head, the top of their head is getting, cut off. Or just other visual things to look for when it comes to preflighting. So this doesn't catch everything, and it's good to have a pair of eyes look at it, but it will go through and automatically catch a lot of other errors. So the main thing to learn here is that the purpose of Preflight is to catch the errors. It saves prepress and the press room time and money. It saves you time and money, and it also will save you some embarrassment if you preflight your own files. So I highly recommend preflighting your own files before sending them to the printer, and then they're going to preflight them. At least that way you can limit the amount of errors that you're going to send. And one other thing too is when you make a PDF, please open the PDF, look at it before you send it to them, and check it out, and then send it on. We will also in class look at Preflight tools in Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat, in order to preflight PDF files too. So, thank you.